Perhaps no issue is more important than the conspiratorial thinking that has led many otherwise well-meaning Americans to raise awareness about child sex trafficking epidemic that simply does not exist.
Number one consumer of child sex in the world is the United States, and Mexico is the number one provider. We have to do something. We cannot look the other way around because child pornography is growing. 60% of child pornography that is consumed by the world is produced in Mexico. In my country, we're a Catholic country, where 90% of the people are Catholic, where we celebrate freedom, family values, and Our Lady Guadalupe appeared there almost 500 years ago.
I'm going to give you my honest take on the movie Sound of Freedom, but does CNN support pedophiles and child sex slavery? Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley, and this is not a podcast. Now, mainstream news outlets and social media companies will attack, demean, and go after any movie or show that's patriotic or supports the nuclear family unit. They did the same thing with Last Man Standing with Tim Allen on ABC and Fox, and The Terminal List with Chris Pratt, the novel written by Jack Carr, which became the #1 show on Amazon Prime.
It seems to have triggered quite a few of these critics, and I have a couple examples here. Daily Beast titled their review, "The Terminal List is an unhinged right-wing revenge fantasy," which is odd because right, left, conservative, liberal are not even mentioned in the show, but they go on to write, "There is some serious danger to the Terminal List pandering to red state viewers with routine references to beer, guns, country music, and hunting." And then one more line here. It's from TV Line. It says, "The fugitive meets SEAL team meets a Don't Tread on Me truck decal. We're served up huge helpings of red meat masculinity and lots of American flags." They don't like American flags over there. Game Rant even cites Revolutionary War era Don't Tread on Me flags as a negative. So it's odd that both Game Rants and TV Line had to go back to the 1700s to take the side of the British in their reviews. I found that quite telling.
Now, many of you, like myself, have already seen the movie Sound of Freedom, which is about sex slavery and child trafficking, starring Jim Caviezel, who also played Jesus on Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ. I'm gonna be honest with you, many people think that it's a faith-based film, which usually means low budget, terrible acting, but a great message, so you shouldn't badmouth it. Kind of like Christian rap used to be. The closest thing that we had when I was a kid was Carmen, but that's another story. This movie was a 9 out of 10 for me. The acting was incredible, from Crystal Aparicio, who played Rocio, to Jim Caviezel, who played Tim Ballard or Timoteo. The film was based on a true story that I'll show you at the end of this video, and even though I knew the story going in, the movie kept me captivated, and it actually felt like it had 3 different climaxes, which I normally would say is terrible, but this was really good. This movie generated over $40 million within its first 6 days of release, and as of today, over $50 million. I went to go see this movie in the middle of the week at a 3 p.m. showing at The Grove in Beverly Hills, and the theater was packed. I was shocked, because I don't normally like going to see movies with a packed theater unless it's like a premiere or something. How Jim Caviezel's faith-based Sound of Freedom became this summer's unlikely box office hit. Angel Studios opened Sound of Freedom last Tuesday, generating a mighty $14.2 million on Independence Day. The film picked up another $18.2 million between Friday and Sunday, enough to place 3rd on domestic box office charts behind Insidious, The Red Door, $32.6 million, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, $26.5 million. It's also playing in 2,850 North American theaters, a smaller footprint than those 2 studio films, playing in 3,188 theaters and 4,600 theaters respectively. Now, you would think that one of the top films in the nation that's based on a true story of children being kidnapped and sold into sex slavery around the world to elites and pedophiles would be covered on the national media as a good thing. I mean, we all can agree that sex with children is bad, right? Well, maybe not all of us can agree on that, especially if you live in California, where California changes sex offender law to be inclusive to LGBTQ community. In September, a new law signed by California Governor Gavin Newsom amends a former law by giving judges discretion on listing an individual as a sex offender if they have consensual, anal, or oral sex with a minor aged 14 or older. Controversy still surrounds the law. However, because it allows a 10-year age gap in these relationships, some opponents claim that the law protects pedophilia no matter whom it applies. The law was created for situations like those in which 2 teenagers are in a relationship and one reaches the age of 18 before the other. However, those against the law point out that it could also apply to a 24-year-old having sex with a 14-year-old, which they feel is unacceptable. And while we're talking about sex trafficking in California, this is from July 11th, 2023, just a few days before this video is being recorded. The Assembly Public Safety Committee blocks bill to make child trafficking a serious felony. Here's Tim Ballard talking with Jordan Peterson about connecting the dots.
And this congressman was telling me, how do we wake people up to the fact that all these unaccompanied minors are being shoved into America and we don't know where they are? And I said, well, your problem is you're not connecting all the dots, all the ways in which children are being hurt. Not only these 85,000 missing children that are now in the belly of the largest potentially child sex market in the world, but at the same time that's happening, you have groups trying to get rid of the name pedophile and call them minor attracted persons. At the same time, you're sexualizing children, giving them what I used to be able to arrest you for giving children. Now teachers in California and other states are giving this in the name of liberating children sexually or sex education. And now a 13-year-old can consent to gender mutilation and have themselves injected with all sorts of chemicals that might ruin their reproductive system. Well, what are you doing? Consent to do that equals consent eventually to sex with a 50-year-old pedophile. And so if you got to connect all these things. And so I for the first time in my life, Jordan, I'm looking at the United States of America and I'm saying, look, I used to think I might be out of a job because we eradicated human trafficking. I am now thinking I might be out of a job because the very laws that protect children and allow us to go after their captors are being and will be decaying and eroded with this crazy culture that is taking children in the name of liberating them and in fact is enslaving them.
But let's just put that aside and just move forward agreeing that child sex trafficking is wrong. Okay, cool. Sound of Freedom was originally set at 20th Century Fox and was completed in 2018 before Disney acquired the studio the following year and shelved the film. It's now being distributed independently by Angel Studios. Go figure. Disney acquires 20th Century Fox and the following year shelved Sound of Freedom. Now, I'm not going to get into it in this episode, but if you want more info on Disney and their not-so-gay agenda, go watch my 2-part episode of Not a Podcast called Sexualizing Children. Follow that up with an episode called Pedophiles or Maps. Anyways, this movie's doing great numbers at the box office and as of now has a critic score of 75% and an audience score of 100%. But CNN is covering it as though it's a bad thing and tries to discourage viewers to go watch it and calls it a QAnon promoters movie.
You have a lot of people who are in this world of QAnon who say, oh, they don't know what that is, they've never heard of it, they're just asking questions. With somebody like Jim Caviezel, he is openly embracing it, he's openly using its catchphrases and its concepts, he's speaking at QAnon conventions, and this film is being marketed to either specific QAnon believers or to people who believe all of the same tenets as QAnon, but claim they don't know what it is.
Oh, it's being marketed to QAnon believers or people that believe the same tenets as QAnon. The movie was finished in 2018. Y'all didn't even hear about QAnon until the 2020 election period. The real story was back in 2014, dipshit.
And The Sound of Freedom does focus on a real issue of sex trafficking. But that theme, it's sort of like that kernel of truth that feeds the QAnon conspiracy theory.
Oh, so it's a kernel of truth. But this kind of stuff isn't really new with CNN. This is Don Lemon years ago sympathizing for Jerry Sandusky.
I want to ask you something, and I know people are going to probably send me a lot of hate mail for this. I've never been one to take glee in anyone's demise, and when I saw Jerry Sandusky walk out in handcuffs, I did kind of feel a bit sorry for him, even though I know the jury found him to do some horrific things. I was like, you know, his life is over. All of these young boys, it was terrible for them as well. There are no winners. In your piece, you say someone has no choice to be a pedophile, but someone can choose to not be a child molester. So explain that to us.
Well, we have to understand very specifically that pedophilia is separate from child molestation. Pedophilia refers to the actual, genuine, underlying sexual interest. For some reason, and we haven't worked out the details yet, there are some people born with a genuine sexual interest in children.
I can't with these idiots.
Sure, and the most durable and the most believable conspiracy theories are not entirely false. There's something in them that is true, and the rest of it is false. But the believers point to the one true thing, and they say, oh, you don't believe that this particular thing is true. In terms of child trafficking, we know trafficking is real. We know it has real victims. No one is denying that. But these films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites, and only people like Tim Ballard and only people like Jim Caviezel, and by extension, only people like the ticket buyer can help bring these trafficking rings down. So there's a very participatory element. You're not just going to see a movie, you're just killing 2 hours on a hot day. You are helping bring down these pedophile rings and save children. Now, it's not true, but it's a very comforting and it's a very warm feeling going to have.
So he says it's not true, and it's a warm feeling you have by bringing awareness to a true thing and spending your money on a movie that inevitably brings financial support to organizations like Operation Underground Railroad and others that actually go and rescue children. What these idiots fail to even realize at CNN is that this movie was based off of a true story and a true mission. Watch this.
Last weekend, police broke up a major sex trafficking ring in Colombia, which has become a destination for tourists looking for sex with boys and girls. The police had help from an American who went undercover to rescue the children, and Elaine Quijano met him.
Tim Ballard has one mission: to track down child traffickers. 4 months ago, Colombian authorities asked him to investigate a tip that children were being sold there as sex slaves.
Within a half hour, this individual walks up to me, starts asking me what I'm here for, what I want, and within minutes, he says, well, I've got kids as young as 11 years old.
Ballard, a former Homeland Security agent, now heads up Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit group that rescues trafficked kids. After that first meeting, the Colombians asked him to put together a sting.
No men will be in here, only women.
Operation Underground Railroad spent months planning, renting this house, rigging it with hidden cameras to document the crime, coordinating with Colombian authorities, and negotiating with the traffickers.
How they find these kids is they lure them in by pretending to have a modeling agency. They target them at 9 or 10 years old. And they were telling us that about by 11, they're ready for sex. They're ready to be sold.
What is that like, looking into that kind of person's eyes?
It's horrifying, and this is why. Because I've got a smile in the face of evil.
This is the table where we're going to do the negotiation.
Less than 24 hours after the operatives landed, the suspected traffickers arrived on the island, and the final deal with the undercover team began. 54 boys and girls aged 11 to 18 were ushered in for what had been billed as a sex party. They were given candy and drinks and told to wait in this small room.
This little 11-year-old boy, I remember, he asked one of my operatives if they could give him some cocaine or something. He said, they usually give me something because I'm really scared.
By the time the deal was done, the alleged traffickers were set to make $25,000. That transaction was never completed. 25 Colombian special operatives stormed the party, arresting 5 suspects, 4 men and 1 former beauty queen, all charged with child trafficking. The victims, 29 of whom are under 18, were evacuated, given medical exams, and placed in a rehabilitation center where specialists are working to undo the damage.
Right before I got in the boat, we had to walk by this room where the kids were, and they put their hand up. And I touched their hand and see that there's liberation now.
Liberating one child at a time. Elaine Quijano, CBS News, New York.